So we're here for our 16th Release Management Think Big session. Hannah, I know that you only got 30 minutes today, so we have two topics on the agenda. The first topic is about creating like a permission schema for environments for different related objects. So let me give you some context around how this issue came up. So Ori pinged me on a feature flags issue, being like users wanted to, that she was talking to, feature flags users, wanted a way to globally apply the way certain types of users or roles can interact with an environment. So they wanted to be able to lock down the enabling or disabling of a feature flag on a protected environment, being this specific use case. When I started to talk to other users about what are things that they are currently wishing to that were scoped per environment, I started to learn that CI variables have this attribute called environment scopes in the YAML file. And there really isn't a clean way to manage that at the group level, because obviously we don't share environments at the group, but in each project, they have to specify this environment scope for the variable. We have a very similar setup around like deploy keys. They're scoped specifically to an environment. And then other attributes like CI tokens, the CI job token is obviously on the project level. So when we started to talk more about global things that users are leveraging environments with, they have to specify a scope and then copy paste that scope across many different projects. So my ask in this issue is to make permissions for objects that end up affixing to a specific object like an environment easy in GitLab. What are your thoughts? Are there more details that I can provide on the use case or examples?
Hi. Having worked on a permissions issue recently, or still working on it, the permissions model at GitLab is actually it's many layered, and I think we would just have to be really careful to make the permissions clear. So in the protected environments, I found some issues between the permissions that exist on the project versus the permissions that exist for the, some inconsistencies, and I think at least one actual bug. And then when you think about it, we've got like, here's one place where we set the permissions in the project, and then we have another place where we're setting a different set of permissions, and they're kind of a subset, but not always. And I think that permissions is a very powerful part of GitLab, but it's a bit complex. And if we can simplify it in our implementation, I think that would be a great thing.
Well, good. I'm glad we have your support here. That's important for me. I think that one part that I'm struggling with as a former release manager is that our permissions schema is not flexible in GitLab. So like it's so role focused. And that's why I'm proposing this different way of thinking about permissions, that we like create a permission structure on the environment object so that we can fine tune what environments do that are role absent.
I completely agree. So that's a potentially, I mean, we can do a minimal version, but it's potentially a big can of worms, because in fact, one of the limitations on the current model is it's hard users can only change permissions in a very specified way, and they don't have a lot of flexibility as opposed to other systems where they can create roles and all that. I mean, we don't want to go there, but I mean, I think we could just kind of have a generic higher level permission that would fit into the GitLab main declarative policy framework, and then we could have, and here are some refinements of that, for our use case.
I love that. So thinking big, taking a step back on what I would expect users to do. So I think that
Yeah,
this makes sense to have it in the UI rather than an
oh yeah,
YAML file. So
yeah,
I
yeah,
wanted to make that
sure,
super clear. And I also
yeah,
feel like it allows us to do some experiments a little bit quicker. So not to like solution so much, but one of the biggest problems that I'm hearing from customers are that your permissions aren't flexible. I'm not able to globally apply this per my instance or project, like set
mm,
of projects in the same group. I would like to separate out the role permission paradigm and look at specific groups, or better yet,
yeah,
a specific banking customer that I talk with frequently doesn't even use groups and projects in GitLab. They create random projects and groups and they piece them together with topic labels.
oh
So they
wow,
have, yeah, so they're creating business unit hierarchies from projects that are spanned across multiple different portfolios. So we
mm-hmm.
don't, and that's because of the project and group permissioning structure. They want
Yeah,
to have a separations of duties. So they're keeping teams of the same group in separate projects and groups and connecting them together with a topic label. And that's because we don't have a really great way of like
yeah,
enforcing compliance needs out of our current paradigm.
yeah.
So I
Well,
think that the,
speaking,
go ahead.
I was going to say, speaking of compliance, it's also not really. I mean, what's an easy way to audit? I mean, permissions is a bigger issue than just release management. You know, it spans the entire product. But I mean, how can you say, you know, Joe in accounting has the access to this? It's actually not really that easy, right? Like access to deploy. You know, we don't. As far as I know, we don't have any. I'm not suggesting we necessarily build it, but it is. There seems to be a lack that we don't have a view of what are all the permissions for an individual person in one particular go. You know, depending, you know, they might be derived in all different ways, but um, yeah, it seems to me a big hole that we don't have that in some way, a report or something, you know.
We do have a report from the API that allows users to like export all of their assigned people across all of their projects for their instance. That's obviously a self-managed
Okay, sure.
customer.
Okay. Yeah.
And it just gets tricky when you're also looking at like a matrixed system that isn't using the natural flow in GitLab that are group and projects that you can see at the top level in an inheritance. So
Yeah.
of course, like the compliance team is working on permissions from like a user perspective in a different way, like the managed team, they own that. So what I'm trying to like bifurcate here is us being beholden to the role user specific permission schema in order to afford a greater flexibility of using GitLab the way users want to use GitLab.
Mm-hmm.
So allowing them to create separations of duties at the environment level without
Yeah.
having to rely on the role permission schema. So how can we like bake in flexibility by creating that that fluidity of permissions at
Yeah.
that granular
Well,
level?
well,
You know?
see, the protected environments is the beginning, you know, it is already its own permissions system, or more or less. It's very small, but I think we will, I mean, it doesn't have to be called protected environments. It could just be environments. And then we could progressively add to it, you know, what are these environments? Who has access to them? What can they do to them? And you know, that could be different between staging and production and etc.
I like
And so there's the seed of that is already there, actually.
yeah. So we just get to build
Although
on that.
I got to say, it's a bit ugly
So maybe
internally.
so maybe like from an iteration standpoint, the first step is to refactor and relook
Sure,
at protected environments and kind of
sure, yeah, sure,
structure it in a
yeah,
more structure it in a way that like allows us to actually create this appending of like other objects that are beyond just protected environments, because we'd want to add the things to the environments inside of GitLab, you know, like I want to control feature flags for this environment in a single
yeah,
view. And I think like this allows us to also connect in the environment's dashboard view all of these related objects to, like, being able
So
to
could that be like, maybe we would name it something else, but environment permissions, and then protected environment would just be one of those attributes on those, you know, and this environment is protected and it's protected for these people or whatever. Kind of turn it around a little bit, but the focus is the environment. You know, the environment is what we're interested in, and who can do what to those environments.
Would a good parallel to this be the protected branches? I'll share my screen real quick. Let's see. I'm just looking at this here where we have, you can kind of select on a per branch basis. You can say for master maintainers and developers, you could do specific roles, or you can actually select specific users or some combination of that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
I think
what we're thinking.
No, it's very similar. I think the protected environments has been modeled on this, but it's a lot less baked, and particularly what we're talking about, we might want to add more and more to it.
Yeah, I think that this could be a paradigm that we emulate, because you see, even in the same view, we have branches, tags, tokens, and keys, which are a view of the other things that I thought that we would want to be also like controlling per environment. So I completely agree that we would be expanding environments to kind of match this pattern. Maybe this could be the MVC, like we refactor protected environments to kind of match protected branches, and then add other environment permission functionality. Maybe. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think like environments, for example, clearly falls under release management, and probably tags us as well. But branches, you know, we'd have to buy in from other parts of the organization for changing how that would look.
Yeah. If I think about the use case that I'm trying to solve with this environment's permission structure, like the way I see it is like a matrix. We have like environments, permissions, and then you have like roles across the top, and you have all the features that are in that environment, and it's like a variable, tokens, branches, like whatever. And then you have like a checkbox for each role that you can specify. And you also have the option, I want to enable adding specific users. I want to enable adding specific groups. And that way we can add, like, we can afford the flexibility of that bank I was referencing to add specific people or groups to each of those different attributes under that environment matrix. And then I think you could, like below that, you'd be able to have an expanded out, like protected variables, permission management, or feature flag permission management, like just like the protected branches section. This is like a really big concept though, you know, that would be like.
It's complete, but it's completely clear actually. I mean, you see this in many types of systems, right? Particularly when the users can define their own roles, right? And define what's a role is just a bucket. But in GitLab, you know, roles are really clearly defined, right? There's, you know, developer, reporter, maintainer. And so the only way around it is to do what you're describing, which is to essentially build a kind of mini permissions system.
And I think like if we can find a way to separate roles from environments or allow like there to be more flexibility there, that would solve like a lot of our problems we're hearing from customers, right?
I think we'd have to not call them roles, because we've already got a concept of role, right? And we'd have to give them another name, like maybe not group either. Group we're already using too.
Could we use group for that purpose? Like we already have the like groups, you can add people to them, and then we could start using that as we could drive it off that.
Actually, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, start with group.
With it, it'd be a little weird because you get all the rest of the stuff that comes along with the group like if you're just using a group for essentially user management, like a GitLab group is so much bigger than just a way to group users. But maybe that's okay.
But no, but it doesn't have to be, and you can build a hierarchy of groups, and yeah, I think that's actually a really good idea to start to use groups, and then build off of groups all these other things we've been talking about.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me.
I'm just thinking of how when we have a hierarchy of groups and we can assign someone to a group, but if we assign them to the top, they get all the children, right? Or is there a way of controlling that?
So they're disabling inheritance in the compliance team. So,
really?
Yeah. So that should be a configuration option that a right. customer would select, that I want to disable automatic inheritance. But that's like exactly why certain customers are not using groups and projects in the hierarchy, is because the inheritance problem. But like that's where again, like I'm trying to find a way that we can like decouple the current permission schema as we know it to manage access and management of these different objects by environment. So like how can we not look at the way things are organized today to enable people to effectively manage these different things that are on the environment?
Yeah, that will, and the list will probably grow, right? So just back to the group. So is there no way to say you can have level A, but you can't have level C and below? We don't support that.
Not today, no.
Yeah, that's a big miss actually, because once you give someone a high level, they get everything right.
Yeah, like if they are a maintainer at the highest group, they will be percolated down.
Yeah. So in fact, the only way around that would be to manually assign them to everything they should have, and then exclude the ones, which is not so good.
One thing we'll have to be careful of if we do add another concept of like permissions is that we'd have all these different ways to add people and manage. So we'd have like roles, we have guest developer, etc. Then we have groups. So you have access to groups in that whole hierarchy. And then if we add a third permissions model, then you have to make sure that users are clear of how they add themselves to certain privileges. It could get confusing if we have a lot of different ways to do it.
And maybe this is a consolidation exercise too. Like we just create a single place to administer that, and we afford the option of using the same sort of permission paradigm that we have today, which is you can add users, you can add groups, and you can add roles. So if we say like those are the three things that you can add, just consolidating it in one view and allowing people to say, here, I want to have all of my protected environments enable group maintainer and project maintainers and specific group deployers. Or I want feature flags on production environments to be managed by only project maintainers, but not group maintainers and deployers. So like being able to manage that logic in a single place.
Yeah. I can absolutely understand why customers would want this. It is big though. But we could start with essentially doing it inside of release management and then exporting it. But you've got a really good point, Nathan, in that we already have we already have three, because we have, for example, protected branches and protected environments. So that the need clearly exists, right? That there needs to be another level of granularity on permissions. And they do, in theory, drive off the existing roles. So they are, in theory, a refinement, of who's been already added to the project. I mean, we could just kind of like refactor that stuff a bit, maybe to start with.
The other thing I'm thinking about too is that like all our tiers and our pricing is based on roles right now. Like that's our whole pricing structure, is that you a user who has more privileges costs more.
Yep.
Well, I think it's like there's like a cap. Now that I'm saying that, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure about that. I think.
Oh no, I think actually we do. Yeah.
Well, Well, but we do that also at a feature level, right? Because protected environments is an EE. You just don't have it on your screen at all, right? If you're listing it on an EE license.
Yeah, I don't think you get charged for like having a bunch of maintainers though. Like
I think now that I say that, I think I'm confusing. There was people were asking to charge less for reporters or something like that. That was like a feature request, but I don't think we actually do that. So ignore the comment.
But Sean, to your point, yes, you're absolutely right. Like premium features do end up using a lever of you can specify, you have the privilege of specifying specific roles like that.
Yeah.
That is a common pattern that we see in features that are premium and ultimate, affording that flexibility, because that's a part of multi-project management, which is a pricing capability in Silver and Premium, right?
Yeah.
So taking like a step back on this, when I think about the pain that customers are really articulating when they say that I want to be able to more granularly manipulate who has access to a feature flag with a certain kind of attribute. I wonder, like, is this something that we want to only push down to each of the feature levels? Because we could say, yeah, or feature flags need to have their own permission schema that relies on role assignments, and we're not going to manage this at the environment level. That's a choice that we can make. And then we'll have this disparate experience that we're noticing between like protected branches, protected environments, deploy keys, deploy tokens, specifying environment scopes and CI variables in the YAML file. So like, I think that we just have a bunch of different ways to manage permissions.
Exactly.
Yep. Standardizing how we want customers to manage permissions, I think, is part of the problem. But I do wonder if there's like an easier fix around containing particular permissions that are in the release stage that we can help improve. Like if a release manager, if we only think about the release manager's persona and what they're responsible for managing, or like a dev team lead, someone who's like coordinating builds, having that single user flow might be like what we can deliver or render as a first iteration.
Yeah, well, I mean, environments come to mind. I mean, they clearly fall within our scope, and there's a lot around them already. We could look at which feature flags are directly affecting them and kind of put them in a little list or something. I really like this idea, by the way. I think it's really needed, and it is potentially big. And so, and I think that part of the reason we've got these different approaches is, in the past, I don't think we've looked at this whole thing big picture. And so there's these little like protected branches and, protected environments do things slightly differently. And so I think it would be, this would be the sort of feature that would be really quite beneficial to maybe do a couple of iterations on paper before we go near any actual code. I think, yeah. And we can kind of chip away at what we've got already and refine that, but with the larger roadmap, of the future, maybe potentially even exporting into the rest of the organization.
Yeah, I like that. So from what I think actionable next steps around this feature set would be, opening up an issue around matching protected environments to protected branches. If that, because I think protected branches are a little bit more adopted and people are a little bit happier with the way they work, and matching that schema. And then creating a separate issue for allowing environment scopes for variables or like environment scopes to be managed in the UI. And I think like those are two existing features that we can like start incrementally delivering as a part of the release management story. And then I can open up an epic around ops settings for permissions. And we can create like an ops section, think big discussion around how do we want to enable users to easily set the permissions for different objects per environment. And I think that will, I think that
wow,
a good discussion. Okay.
Right.
Awesome. Any other thoughts on that?
I have a question, Jack. You mentioned in the beginning that some customers are not using projects or groups, and you mentioned something like a topic label. What do you mean by that? It's really like a label that they assign to issues and merge requests that make everything belong to a single bucket, or?
There's a thing called a topic in GitLab, and it's on the repo. It lives on the repo. Let me add a link to this. Let me see if I can find it. They showed it to me, and I was like, I've never seen this before. But it really is like, it is like a label that lives on the project, and it's how like the compliance team.
Okay, so like CSS or HTML, whatever
Right.
that you have together, but I don't know how to configure that.
So it's a label.
But where do you configure that when you create the project?
I'm thinking of the same thing. It's not like a label, like our concept of a label. It's just text that you can add in the project settings that show up on the project home screen.
Right, exactly.
And they kind of group things. But I don't know how you would use that for anything other than superficial purpose. Like it's really just text. I don't think you can search on it or group things.
Where is it exactly? I can't see it.
They have a bunch of reports from the API that allows them to like export it, and then they can do things with it. Right, exactly.
Oh my God. Right, okay. Never would have found that one. Sure.
My project now.
And see, it has a label. Right, exactly. Look at you.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's how they're driving their hierarchy.
But okay.
Yeah, I can see why that would be frustrating.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, because I was a bit confused in the beginning. I was trying to find out how would you like label a project using or filter a project using labels, and how that would affect, for example, the settings. If it's not in the group or project level, then where is this? So
it still lives in a group and project. It's just they match the permissions of those projects and the groups based off of that filtered label or topic. So it's like a manual process they're going through. Like they'll create project A and group A, project B under group B, and those will have two different permission structures. But people who are maintainers in project A and they want them to be maintainers in project B, they'll add them at that level, but not at the group level.
Okay.
So it's a painful thing for them. Yeah.
It's like the lowest MVC you can do for tagging.
Right.
No, I have to drop, folks. See you later.
So I'll create these issues and we can start thinking about what that looks like. The other topic that I had on the agenda are GitLab Run Books. This is an epic that I kind of created to start articulating some of the things that I validated with users around how do you want to, if GitLab was to provide a native runbook functionality, what would you do? Because today we've been really focused on like just supporting their own runbooks they have, whether it's in Jupyter, whether it's just an Excel document or a wiki or a link or a README inside of a project, like just enabling them to link it back. But this next feature set is something that I think that we'll be delivering in 2021. So something that will like, next year, but I wanted to start the dialogue on it. Monitor Health is creating a thing called an issue type incident. So they're using issues as a way to create incidents inside of GitLab. So they pretty much cloned issue type, rebranded it as incidents, started removing issue type specific scope, and started adding back specific stuff to an incident so that they can link incidents back to everything inside of GitLab. I think we can take a learning from this, because when I look at run books, commonly we see the issue, like the run book created at time of release or deployment. So when I think about this, it's like the issue that's generated at the release post for product managers, the issue that's created for the runner team when they cut their release, the process that we go through for pages release, even like all of that can be tracked inside of an issue as a task list. So when I think about some of the other requirements that are a little bit fuzzy and nuanced, users want to be able to share run books across groups. They also want to share them across projects. And there's a way that we could leverage something like an issue template to create deployment run books. So they can trigger a bot, kind of like how we automatically create issues like the retrospective issue. You can automatically trigger on the 23rd of every month the following release run book. And it would maybe have webhooks that trigger several events, and you can link that across multiple different projects, leveraging group milestones. You could assign it to different release managers per like an assignee table, or a release manager roulette. So like I can see like a lot of the issue functionality help facilitate a run book really cleanly. I do think there's some limitations, and I have like monitor health on the issue. I have Victor and configure on the issue, because when I also consider like disaster recovery run books or automatic rollback run books, those might not necessarily make sense in an issue type, but I could see if we could support run books at the group level and leverage the issue template functionality, and then have like triggers inside of GitLab that say, okay, we have this job in a pipeline and its test results are less than 80% passing. We'll do an automatic rollback to staging, or proceed with rollout to a different environment. And that could like be a triggered event from this run book template that's in an issue. What are your thoughts?
I think this is a really cool idea. I feel like there's like a million ways you could take that and use it. It'd just be super flexible. So there'd be a lot of cases to consider, but I really like the core idea. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and I think taking it back the way you mentioned, Jackie, taking a different view is the way to go, because we could then eventually build out, is this going to be a Jupyter notebook or whatever? That would just be in that. I think we were looking at it from a different perspective before, and even if you just start with an issue template, and then you can start working out how do you do the more complex things like rollbacks, but just connecting it to group or project would be a good start.
And I think fundamentally, if we can support things like executing scripts from the issues, or maybe we add like runbook quick commands. So like we can say there's a Slack webhook from the runbook that you run Slack command listed in the issue. Like building out that feature functionality would be a really great quality of life experience. And like I could see a world where we add a quick command that's like generate release notes for this release based off of this run book from that run book issue. So like adding quick commands to execute scripts from that document, I think would be a really great enhancement to bring this whole deployment list full circle.
Yeah, it'd also be an awesome audit trail, right? Because all the commands would be, they'd be basically comments.
Yeah, they'd be comments, they're tracked in the activity logs, and all that exists today because we just clone the existing issue type. So we don't have to worry about rebuilding out that feature functionality. And what's even cooler is when we think about release evidence, these issues can be sucked back into release evidence because we have issues already in the docket for hardening release evidence. So that's kind of the.
The idea would we would basically clone issue into runbook, or a cut down version of issue, right?
Yeah. So we would
and then take a different direction.
Yeah. So in the Epic, I kind of have like an iteration path on the Epic that says we clone it, and then we start removing stuff, and then we add stuff.
Right.
So like the MVC is, hey, now you can use this runbook template, and maybe we create 3 different template types. One of them being like a cloud native, very much like you are continuous. You tag each commit and deployment to production, and you generate a tag. Like we can do it that way, or you can do a hybrid where you have to specify, and it's a little bit more manual action. But like, just thinking through making it really easy to use existing stuff and paradigms in GitLab to link and support this runbook use case.
One thing that comes to mind is if you're looking at the kind of runbook where, do this step, do this step, do this step, it's essentially table based, right? Like and so I wonder how that we would possibly do. Would that kind of go in the issue body, and that would be the runbook, and then the comments would be the actual what happened. Then they click this button, then they did this, and if we did that, would normal markdown tables do it for us, or do we want to have something a bit more flexible? Because markdown tables are great, but they're fiddly to work with, right?
Right.
We have a little shortcut, but there's probably great libraries for doing that type of, doing tables in a slightly better way.
That's a really great call out, because markdown tables will be a pain to manage. My initial thought is that like the templates that we create will be just a series of check boxes, and they would have like code blocks for scripts that you need to run. So the MVC is that you have to go to your CLI and run this script.
Yeah.
But then in the future, we enable things like you check that box and then it runs the script for you, or you use a quick command on the issue and it runs that script for you.
So the potential, and so in the past I've used these Jupyter notebooks for different purposes, and when they get really long, you get a bit lost, right? Particularly when you've got output, because the output can be really long as well. So he's scrolling, and so I guess 2 possible approaches would be to have it at some section have the steps in one section, or have them just throughout it, but then have a button that just says only show me the steps now. And have that.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, like we do with comments.
Right. Right. But that's kind of what we're thinking for Runbook. So if you want to take a look at the Epic and add some additional thoughts and considerations, I am all open for it. I know that we're at time. I'll take some actions from our first discussion topic around the environment's permission schema, and then we'll talk more about runbooks as we get closer to next year. We have so much stuff right now that we obviously won't be able to start
Works for me.
This,
they do sound pretty exciting though. I think it's going to be awesome. And the issue approach is a good approach.
Oh, thank you. That makes me feel good. There's some stuff that I'm worried about, but we'll work through it. Thank you all for your time. This was a good session. Talk soon.